The high ridges of the Bitterroot Mountains stood like broken teeth against the fading light, their slopes already swallowed in the long blue shadows of evening. A hush had fallen over the forest, the kind that only comes when winter is preparing to tighten its grip. Not even the creek below stirred with much life. Its surface carried a thin skin of ice, whispering under the pressure of the cold. The drifter moved slow through the timber, a horse trailing behind him, its breath rising in thick clouds that hung in the still air. He wasn't heading anywhere in particular, he never did, but he had learned long ago to trust the silence of the wilderness. It told him when to move, when to wait, and sometimes when to listen. That was when he heard it. At first he thought it was just the wind threading itself through the pines high and thin, like it sometimes did when the branches bent in the cold. But then it rose again, clearer, trembling yet steady, a voice singing words he couldn't place. A woman's voice, carried by the trees, floating down the slope as if the forest itself had chosen to speak. He stopped. The horse shifted behind him, uneasy. There was no cabin nearby, no ranch, no camp he knew of within a day's ride, no reason for a song to be echoing through the woods at this hour, and yet it came again, softer now, like a secret meant only for the night to hold. The drifter tightened his coat against the cold, his jaw set. He had known this country long enough to recognize its dangers. Voices where none should be were seldom a good sign. Still, something in the sound pulled at him. It wasn't the voice of a ghost, nor the wail of something lost. It was too human, too raw with the kind of sorrow that couldn't be faked. He touched the horse's reins, then let go. His boots pressed into the snow as he stepped forward, following the song deeper into the trees. The pin seemed to lean closer as he moved, their boughs heavy with frost, their needles whispering in tones that seemed to echo her voice back to him. He walked until the world narrowed into sound, the rise and fall of her song, the crunch of his own footsteps, the faint rasp of breath in his chest. And there, somewhere ahead, the voice waited. The song wound through the timber like smoke, curling between the trees, drawing him on. Each note trembled with something heavy, sorrow maybe, or longing, but it didn't break. Whoever sang wasn't just passing the time, she was singing to survive the silence. The drifter stepped carefully, his boots sinking into patches of old snow, tucked in the hollows where the sun never reached. Branches snapped underfoot like brittle bones. His horse balked at the edge of the stand, tossing its head, ears pinned back toward the ridgeline. He looped the reins over a low branch and gave the animal a firm pat. "Wait for me," he muttered. Then he pressed deeper into the pines. The voice rose again, closer now, the words clearer, though he still couldn't place them. A hymn, a lullaby. It was too broken, too quiet, yet threaded with enough melody that it seemed to hold the forest itself still. Even the owls, it seemed, waited for her to finish a line before they dared stir. He crested a low slope, and the sight stopped him. A clearing opened beneath a clutch of dark pines, the ground stamped flat and blackened as if fire had passed here once and never returned. At its center was a figure bound to a post, thin wrists lashed with rawhide, hair tangled, face pale beneath the glow of the rising moon. She was the one singing. The drifter's breath caught. Her voice shook, but she held it, lips moving against the cold, notes carrying even as her shoulders slumped from exhaustion. The sound was softer here, no longer just an echo wandering the timber. It was hers, raw and human. Around her feet lay old ash and splinters of wood, not fresh. Whoever had tied her here hadn't meant for her to be found. He stepped closer, slow, his hand near the worn handle of his knife. The woman's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his boots in the frost. For a moment her voice faltered. Then it rose again, higher, strained, as though she feared silence more than whatever might step out of the trees. The drifter felt the hair rise on his arms. He'd seen men left for dead, abandoned where no one would look, but never one who fought the dark with nothing but a song. He moved closer still, until the pine shadows broke and the moonlight touched them both. "Easy," he said, his voice low, steady. Don't stop. Her eyes fixed on him, wide and wary. She did not stop. The drifter stood there a long moment, the frost stiff in his beard, his hand steady on the hilt of his knife. She kept singing. The notes wavered like a candle flame, but they didn't break. It wasn't just a song, it was a shield. The sound filled the clearing, kept back the silence, maybe even kept back the fear. He stepped forward, crunch of boots loud in the stillness. Her eyes tracked him sharply, wide and wild. He could see now she was younger than he first thought, though the dirt and exhaustion carved lines into her face. Her lips were chapped raw, yet she forced them to move, to shape each trembling word. "Easy," he said again, his voice soft but firm, the way a man might talk to a skittish horse. "I ain't here to harm you." The song faltered then, breaking into silence for the first time. Her chest heaved, her cracked lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. She only stared, tense as a bowstring. He pulled the knife from his belt, slowly, deliberately, letting the moonlight catch on the blade so she could see it. Her breath quickened. She twisted against the rawhide, wrists burning as she tried to pull free. "Not for you," he said quickly. "For the rope." She stilled, though her body remained taut, ready to bolt if she could. The drifty crouched in front of her, careful to keep his movements slow. He saw the angry welts where the bindings cut into her skin. Whoever tied her hadn't cared if the blood ran. He slid the blade beneath the taut strip, his hand steady even as her breath came sharp and fast above him. A single pull, and the first rope gave. Her right arm fell slack, and she let out a sound, a gasp, maybe, or a sob, that caught in her throat before it could leave her lips. He moved to the other wrist, her eyes never left his face, watching, weighing. The second rope parted. The song had left her, but the silence that followed seemed louder still. She stood unsteady, arms falling limp at her sides. For a heartbeat, she looked as though she might collapse straight into the ash at her feet. The drifter caught her by the elbow. "Careful." She flinched from his touch, eyes flashing, but she didn't pull away. Not fully. Up close, he could see how pale she was, how the cold clung to her like a second skin. Her lips parted again, and this time words scraped out, hoarse and broken. "Why'd you follow?" He glanced at the clearing, the ropes on the ground, the black ash at her feet, then back at her. "Because I heard you," he said simply. Her throat worked, and for a moment her gaze softened, the fear in it edged by something else, wary hope, fragile as glass. But then, faint and far off, a sound cut through the night. The drifter froze. It wasn't wind. It was men's voices, low, angry. Coming closer. The girl stiffened at the noise, her head turned sharply toward the trees, eyes wide, lips trembling as if she might start singing again just to drown out what was coming. The drifter's hand went instinctively to his revolver. He knew that sound, the cadence of voices not born of friendly talk, but of men moving in a pack, each syllable sharp as a spur. "They're coming back," she whispered, the words cracked like dry wood. "Then we don't stand here waiting for 'em." He slipped his arm under hers, lifting her gently but firmly to her feet. She swayed against him, too weak to stand steady on her own. The drifter cursed under his breath. She hadn't eaten in days, that much was plain, and the cold had worn her thin. The voices were closer now. Branches snapped in the dark, a boot scuffed stone. The drifter pulled her toward the tree line, every step deliberate, measured. She stumbled, but he caught her weight. His eyes darted through the pines, looking for a gap, a shadow, a path the men wouldn't see. "Can you walk?" he murmured. Her voice was no more than a breath. "I'll try." He guided her, pressing her low against the earth as they slipped into the underbrush. The frost bit through his shirt where her body leaned against his, but he didn't let her fall. The men entered the clearing. The drifter saw them through the branches, 3 of them, big-shouldered, their coats patched with dust and their boots heavy with mud. They carried rifles slung careless but ready, their eyes scanning the darkness. One of them kicked at the severed ropes on the ground. "She's loose." "Then she ain't far." another muttered. The third man spat into the ash. That singing brat don't get more than a mile on her own. The drifter felt the girl shiver against him. He tightened his grip on her arm, steadying her, willing her not to make a sound. Her breath rattled, shallow and quick. The men spread out, their voices calling low to each other as they searched. A lantern flared in one man's hand, casting the trees in long, shifting shadows. The drifter's jaw clenched. They couldn't stay crouched there long. The light would catch them eventually. He leaned close to her ear, voice barely more than a thought. "When I move, you move, quiet as snow." She nodded, though her eyes glistened with fear. The drifter took a slow breath, then eased them backward, step by step, deeper into the pine shadows. Each footfall was a gamble. The crunch of frost, the snap of a twig could bring the rifles on them in an instant. Behind them, one of the men barked a curse. The lantern swung higher, its glow sweeping wide. The drifter's hand tightened on the girl's arm. They had one chance, through the rocks ahead, into the gulch where the moonlight thinned. If they made it there unseen, the forest would swallow them. If not, he didn't let himself finish the thought. "Now," he whispered. And together, they slipped into the dark.